My name is Jake, and I never thought I'd be telling a story like this. My wife Linda and I have been married for 15 years. We live in a cozy suburban neighborhood in a small town in Pennsylvania. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and life moves at a comfortable, predictable pace. Our home is a modest two-story house with a well-kept lawn and a backyard where we've hosted countless barbecues and family gatherings. Linda has always been the more sociable one, while I've preferred the quiet moments, sitting on the porch with a beer, enjoying the peace of our little corner of the world. Linda and I met in college. She was studying early childhood education, and I was working towards a degree in logistics. We hit it off immediately, drawn to each other's sense of humor and shared values. After graduation, we settled down here, in this small town, and I took a job at a local logistics company. It's not glamorous, but it's steady work that allows me to provide for my family. Linda chose to stay home after we got married. She had been working at a nursery, but we both agreed that she should focus on making our house a home. It was a decision we made together, and for years it seemed like the right one. She was great at it. Our home always felt warm and inviting, and she had a knack for decorating that made every holiday special. I thought we had a solid marriage. We didn't have kids, but that was okay. We were happy, or so I thought. Our life together was ordinary, but fulfilling. We had our routines, our little rituals. Friday night was always date night. Dinner at our favorite local restaurant, followed by a movie or a stroll around town. Sundays were for lazy mornings in bed, reading the paper and sipping coffee. We had a close-knit group of friends, and our weekends were often filled with barbecues, game nights, and laughter. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. But over the past few months, things began to change. At first, I didn't think much of it. Linda seemed a bit distant, but I chalked it up to stress or maybe just a rough patch. Every marriage has them, right? But then there were little things, small, almost imperceptible changes in her behavior that gnawed at the back of my mind. I tried to ignore them, to push away the nagging doubts. But as time went on, those doubts grew louder until I couldn't ignore them any longer. Looking back, the signs were there, but I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to believe that the woman I loved, the woman I'd shared my life with for so long, could betray me. But as the pieces started to fall into place, I realized that the life I thought we had was built on a lie. And that realization was just the beginning of a journey that would test me in ways I never imagined. The first inkling that something was wrong came on a random Tuesday evening. Linda had always been a creature of habit, and our routines were sacred. But she started acting differently, breaking those routines in subtle ways that only someone who knew her as well as I did would notice. It began with her phone. Linda used to leave her phone lying around the house without a second thought. But suddenly, it was always with her, clutched tightly in her hand, or tucked into her pocket. She'd get messages and glance at them quickly, her expression unreadable, before tucking the phone away again. "Who's texting you?" I'd ask, trying to sound casual. "Just a friend," she'd reply with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You know, girl talk. I wanted to believe her, but something about the way she acted felt off. There was a guardedness in her eyes, a hint of something she wasn't telling me. I brushed it off at first, convincing myself that I was just being paranoid. Then there were the nights out. Linda had always enjoyed going out with her friends, but it was never excessive. Once a month, maybe twice. But suddenly, she had plans almost every weekend. "Just catching up with the girls," she'd say, planting a quick kiss on my cheek before rushing out the door. She'd come home late, smelling of alcohol and perfume, her laughter a little too loud, her eyes a little too bright. "Did you have fun?" I'd ask when she stumbled in. "Yeah, it was great," she'd reply, her smile too wide, her eyes avoiding mine. I tried to ignore the growing unease, but it was impossible to shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The final straw came one Saturday evening. We had planned a quiet night in, just the two of us. I was looking forward to it. Ordering pizza, watching a movie, maybe just talking like we used to. But an hour before our plans, Linda suddenly announced she had to go out. "I forgot," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I promised Sarah I'd help her with something." "Sarah? Your friend from college?" I asked, confused. "You haven't mentioned her in years." "Yeah, we reconnected on Facebook," she said quickly. "It's no big deal. I'll be back in a couple of hours." I watched her go, a sinking feeling in my stomach. I spent the evening alone, the pizza growing cold on the table, the movie playing to an empty room. She came home late, much later than she'd promised, her explanation vague and unconvincing. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, I couldn't stop the thoughts racing through my mind. Something was happening, something she wasn't telling me. I needed to know the truth, but I had no idea where to start. The next few weeks were a blur of suspicion and doubt. Linda's behavior grew more erratic. She'd get phone calls late at night and step out of the room to take them. She'd spend hours getting ready to go out, putting on makeup and dressing up in a way she hadn't done for years. When I asked her who she was seeing, she'd get defensive, accusing me of being paranoid and controlling. "Why are you always questioning me?" she'd snap, her eyes flashing with anger. "Can't I have a life outside of this house?" "Of course you can," I'd reply, trying to keep my voice calm. "I just want to know what's going on." "Nothing's going on," she'd say, her voice cold and dismissive. "You're just imagining things." But I wasn't imagining things. I could feel the distance growing between us, the chasm widening with each passing day. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. And so, reluctantly, I decided to take matters into my own hands. One evening, while Linda was out, I went through her phone. She'd always been careful to keep it locked, but I knew her password, an anniversary date she'd never think I'd guess. My heart pounded as I unlocked it, feeling like a criminal in my own home. The messages were there, as I'd suspected, but they were worse than I could have imagined. "Can't wait to see you tonight," one read. "Miss you already," said another. The messages were from someone named Chris, the same Chris she'd mentioned reconnecting with on Facebook. They weren't just friends, they were much more than that. The messages were intimate, filled with pet names and plans to meet up. My heart sank as I scrolled through the evidence of her betrayal, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I put the phone down, my hands shaking, my mind reeling. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Linda, the woman I'd loved and trusted for so long, was cheating on me. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, and I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. That night, as I lay next to her in bed, I couldn't sleep. The weight of what I'd discovered was too heavy, pressing down on me, suffocating me. I needed to confront her, to demand answers, but I was terrified of what I might hear. I knew that once I opened that door, there would be no going back. I spent the next few days in a fog, barely able to function. I went through the motions at work, but my mind was elsewhere, consumed by the thought of Linda and Chris. I replayed every interaction in my mind, searching for clues, for signs I'd missed. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The late nights, the secrecy, the sudden change in her behavior, it all pointed to one thing. I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. I had to confront her, to face the truth head on. But I also knew that once I did, our lives would be changed forever. I just hoped I was strong enough to handle whatever came next. It was a Friday night. One of those nights that had once been sacred to us, our date night. But instead of spending it together, Linda announced she was going out again. "Just another girls' night," she said, her voice casual but her eyes avoiding mine. I nodded, pretending to believe her, but inside I was seething with suspicion. As soon as she left, I grabbed my coat and keys, my mind made up. I had to know the truth. I couldn't go on like this, living with the uncertainty and doubt. I had to catch her in the act, no matter how painful it would be. I followed her, keeping a safe distance, my heart pounding in my chest. Linda drove across town to a quiet upscale neighborhood. She parked her car in front of a house I didn't recognize and went inside without knocking. That alone was a red flag. I parked a few houses down, trying to stay out of sight, my mind racing with possibilities. I waited for what felt like hours, though it was probably only about 15 minutes. Finally, I couldn't take it any longer. I needed to see for myself. I got out of the car and approached the house, my footsteps silent on the sidewalk. The curtains were drawn, but a sliver of light peeked through a gap in the living room window. I crept up to the window, my heart in my throat, and peeked inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. There on the couch was Linda, tangled up with a man I could only assume was Chris. They were kissing, their hands all over each other, oblivious to everything around them. I felt a surge of rage, my hands balling into fists at my sides. But I forced myself to stay calm, to keep watching, needing to gather the proof. As I stood there, frozen, they moved from the couch to the bedroom, shedding clothes as they went. My stomach churned, and bile rose in my throat, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I had to see it, to know for sure. I followed them around the side of the house, where a small window offered a clear view of the bedroom. There they were, in the most intimate of acts, and it felt like a knife to the heart. Linda, the woman I had loved and trusted, was having sex with another man, right there in front of me. The sounds, the movements, everything about it was a brutal confirmation of my worst fears. I stumbled away from the window, my mind reeling, my vision blurred with tears. I felt sick, my body shaking with rage and heartbreak. I wanted to burst in there, to confront them, to demand answers, but I knew I couldn't, not yet. I needed to keep my wits about me, to think clearly. I got back into my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I sat there for a long time, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I felt like I was drowning, the weight of the betrayal crushing me. But amidst the pain and anger, a cold, hard resolve began to form. I needed to confront Linda, to make her face the consequences of her actions. But more than that, I needed to protect myself and my future. I couldn't let her continue to manipulate and deceive me. Finally, I started the car and drove home, my mind made up. I had seen enough. Now it was time to confront Linda and get the truth out in the open, no matter how ugly it might be. When I got home, I paced the living room, my mind racing with what I would say, how I would confront her. The minutes ticked by slowly, each one an eternity as I waited for her to come back. I tried to stay calm, to keep my emotions in check, but it was impossible. I was a powder keg, ready to explode. Hours later, the front door finally creaked open, and Linda walked in, her face flushed, her hair tousled. She looked at me, startled to see me still up. "Jake, what are you doing up?" she asked, trying to sound casual. I didn't answer immediately, just stared at her, my eyes burning with a mix of anger and pain. "We need to talk," I said finally, my voice trembling with barely controlled rage. Linda hesitated, her eyes darting around the room. "Can it wait until morning? I'm really tired." "No," I said firmly, my voice rising. "It can't wait. Sit down, Linda." She reluctantly sat on the couch, her posture defensive. I stood across from her, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I followed you tonight," I said, my voice shaking. "I saw you with him. I saw everything." Her face went pale, and for a moment she looked like she might deny it. But then her expression hardened, and she crossed her arms over her chest. "So what if you did?" she snapped. "What did you expect to find?" "I expected to find the truth," I said, my anger flaring. "And I did. I saw you fucking him, Linda, in his house, on his bed. How long has this been going on?" She didn't answer, just stared at me with defiance in her eyes. That only made my anger burn hotter. "How long, Linda?" I demanded, my voice rising. "How long have you been cheating on me?" "Does it really matter?" she spat back. "You were never around. You never cared about me. What did you expect?" "I expected you to be faithful," I shouted, unable to hold back any longer. "I expected you to be honest. We've been married for 15 years, Linda. I thought we had something real." "Well, you were wrong," she said coldly. "Maybe if you'd been a better husband, this wouldn't have happened." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, feeling a mix of rage and heartbreak. This was the woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life with, and she was tearing it all apart. "I want a divorce," I said finally, my voice trembling with emotion. "I can't do this anymore." Linda's eyes widened, and for a moment she looked genuinely shocked. But then her expression hardened again, and she stood up, her posture defiant. "Fine," she said coldly, "if that's what you want. But don't expect it to be easy." With that, she stormed out of the room, leaving me standing there, feeling like my world had just been shattered. I collapsed onto the couch, my mind reeling with the enormity of what had just happened. I had seen the truth, and now there was no going back. My marriage was over, and I had to find a way to pick up the pieces and move on. The confrontation had left me feeling raw and empty. I had demanded answers, and Linda had given them. But the truth had only deepened the wound. My mind was a whirlwind of anger and pain, and I knew I couldn't let this go unpunished. She had torn our life apart, and I needed her to feel the same pain, to understand the gravity of what she had done. I couldn't just let her walk away unscathed. The next few days were a blur as I plotted my revenge. I knew where Chris lived, and I knew his routines. It wasn't hard to gather more information on him, to learn about his life, his job, his family. The more I learned, the more my anger grew. He had to pay too, not just Linda. They both deserved to face the consequences of their actions. One night I found myself driving to Chris's house. It was late, and the streets were empty. My heart pounded as I pulled up a few houses away, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. This was it. This was the moment I would make them pay. I had brought a crowbar with me, hidden under my jacket. I knew it was extreme, but my anger was blinding. I approached the house quietly, my footsteps silent on the pavement. I circled around to the back, where I knew there was a window that Chris often left unlocked. It only took a moment to jimmy it open and slip inside. The house was dark and silent. I could hear the faint sounds of breathing coming from the bedroom. I crept through the house, my heart pounding in my ears. As I reached the bedroom door, I paused, listening. I could hear them talking, their voices low and intimate. My anger flared, and I pushed the door open, my eyes blazing with fury. Chris and Linda were in bed together, their faces a mask of shock as they saw me standing there. I didn't give them a chance to react. I lunged at Chris, the crowbar in my hand. He tried to scramble away, but I was faster. The first blow landed on his shoulder, sending him sprawling onto the floor. Linda screamed, but I didn't care. I raised the crowbar again, bringing it down with all my strength. "Jake, stop, please!" Linda's voice was shrill with panic, but I was beyond listening. I wanted to make Chris feel the pain, to make him suffer for what he'd done. Chris was trying to crawl away, his face twisted in pain. I landed another blow, this time to his back, and he cried out in agony. I could hear Linda pleading with me, but her words were just noise, drowned out by the roaring in my head. I was consumed by rage, blinded by the need for revenge. Finally, I stepped back, breathing heavily. Chris lay on the floor, moaning in pain, unable to move. I turned to Linda, my eyes burning with anger. "How does it feel, Linda?" I spat, my voice shaking. "How does it feel to have everything you care about destroyed?" She was crying, her face pale with fear. "Jake, please. This isn't you. Please stop." I threw the crowbar onto the floor, the clang echoing in the silence. "You're right," I said, my voice cold. "This isn't me. But you made me this way." With that, I turned and walked out of the house, leaving them both behind. As I drove away, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a hollow emptiness. What had I done? I had let my anger consume me, had let it drive me to violence. But part of me couldn't regret it. They had needed to feel the pain, to understand the consequences of their actions. The next few days were a blur. I expected the police to come knocking at my door at any moment, but they never did. Linda stayed away, and I heard nothing from Chris. I assumed they were too afraid to go to the authorities, too afraid of what might happen if they did. I knew I couldn't stay in that house any longer. It was filled with memories, with reminders of the life I had lost. I packed my things, sold the house, and moved to a new town. It was a fresh start, a chance to leave the past behind, but no matter how far I went, the memories lingered. I couldn't escape the pain, the betrayal. I couldn't escape the knowledge of what I had done. I had sought revenge, and I had found it, but it had come at a cost. I had lost a part of myself in the process, a part that I wasn't sure I could ever get back. Life went on, but I was changed. The anger and pain had left scars, deep and unhealing. I tried to move forward, to build a new life, but the past was always there, a shadow that I couldn't outrun. I had taken my revenge, but it had come at a price, and in the end, I was left wondering if it had been worth it. After the confrontation and the violent outburst at Chris's house, I knew there was no turning back. The incident had taken a toll on me, leaving me emotionally and physically drained. I needed to put an end to this toxic chapter of my life once and for all. It was time to divorce Linda and reclaim my sense of self. I contacted a divorce lawyer the next day. His name was John Stevens, and he came highly recommended. John was known for being ruthless in court, and I needed someone who would fight for my interests. We met at his office, a sleek, modern space that seemed to exude confidence and efficiency. "Jake, I understand this is a difficult time for you," John said, his voice calm and reassuring. but we're going to make sure you get what you deserve. Let's start by discussing the details of your marriage and any assets you and Linda share. I went through everything with him. Our home, our savings, our investments. I told him about Linda's affair with Chris, the betrayal that had shattered our marriage. John took detailed notes, his expression thoughtful. Given the circumstances, we have strong grounds for an at-fault divorce based on adultery, John explained. This will work in your favor, especially when it comes to the division of assets. We'll also push for spousal support, considering Linda has been financially dependent on you. I nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. This was a chance to rebuild, to move forward without the weight of Linda's betrayal dragging me down. The next step was serving Linda with divorce papers. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but it had to be done. John arranged for a process server to deliver the papers to Linda while she was at home. I didn't want to be there for the confrontation. I couldn't face her rage and accusations again. A few days later, I received a call from Linda. She was furious, as I had expected. "Jake, how could you do this?" she yelled into the phone. "You're tearing our lives apart over one mistake." "This isn't about one mistake, Linda," I replied, my voice steady. "It's about a pattern of lies and betrayal. I can't live like this anymore. We both need to move on." "Move on?" she spat. "How am I supposed to move on when you're taking everything from me?" "I'm not taking everything," I said calmly. "I'm taking what's fair. You made your choices, Linda. Now you have to live with the consequences." She hung up on me, but I felt a strange sense of relief. This was the first step toward freeing myself from the toxicity of our marriage. The weeks that followed were filled with legal proceedings and meetings with John. Linda fought tooth and nail, trying to hold on to as much as she could. But the evidence of her affair was damning. John was relentless, and we slowly chipped away at her defenses. During one particularly heated mediation session, Linda lashed out, her face contorted with anger. "You always thought you were better than me," she snarled. "Always working, always putting your career first. Maybe if you had paid more attention to me, this wouldn't have happened." I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. I couldn't let her manipulate me any longer. "I work to provide for us, Linda," I said, my voice firm. "I trusted you, and you betrayed that trust. This isn't my fault." The mediator intervened, bringing the session back to order, and we continued to negotiate the terms of our divorce. It was exhausting, emotionally and mentally draining, but I knew it was necessary. I had to see this through to the end. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we reached a settlement. The house was sold, and the proceeds were divided. Linda received a portion of our savings, but I retained the majority of our investments. John had secured a favorable outcome for me, and I was grateful for his unwavering support. The day the divorce was finalized, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was officially free from Linda, free from the lies and deceit that had poisoned our marriage. It was a bittersweet victory, but a victory nonetheless. That evening, I sat alone in my new apartment, a modest but comfortable space that felt like a fresh start. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and raised it in a silent toast to new beginnings. As I sipped the drink, I thought about the future. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to rebuild my life, to find happiness and peace once again. The scars of Linda's betrayal would always be there, but I hoped that with time, they would fade. For now, I allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. The chapter with Linda was closed, and a new one was beginning. And this time, it was on my terms. Divorcing Linda was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was also the most liberating. The first few weeks after the papers were signed were a strange mix of freedom and uncertainty. I'd spent so long being half of a couple that I'd forgotten what it was like to be just me. But as the days passed, I started to rediscover myself, piece by piece. I threw myself into my work at the logistics company, taking on new projects and responsibilities. The routine was comforting, and the challenges kept my mind occupied. My colleagues noticed the change in me, and, bit by bit, I started to regain the confidence I'd lost during my marriage. I also made an effort to reconnect with old friends, people I'd drifted away from over the years. One evening, my best friend Tom invited me out for drinks. We sat at our old haunt, a cozy pub that had seen countless nights of laughter and camaraderie. Tom raised his glass to me, a broad grin on his face. "To new beginnings, Jake," he said. "It's good to see you smiling again." I clinked my glass against his, feeling a warmth that had been absent for too long. "Thanks, Tom. It feels good to be moving forward." As the night wore on, I opened up to Tom about everything that had happened. The affair, the divorce, and the aftermath. He listened, offering words of encouragement and advice. It felt cathartic to talk about it, to let the pain out instead of bottling it up inside. "You've been through hell, man," Tom said, shaking his head. "But you've come out stronger. Don't let what happened define you. You deserve to be happy." His words stuck with me, a beacon of hope in the darkness. I started to focus on my own well-being, on rebuilding my life in a way that made me truly happy. I picked up old hobbies I had abandoned: photography, hiking, and even playing the guitar. Each activity was a step toward reclaiming the parts of myself I had lost. One Saturday morning, I decided to join a local hiking group. It was something I had always enjoyed, but hadn't done in years. The fresh air and the challenge of the trail felt invigorating, a reminder of the simple pleasures I had neglected. As I hiked, I met new people, formed new friendships, and slowly began to feel like I was part of a community again. Through the hiking group, I met a woman named Emily. She was different from Linda in every way: kind, genuine, and down to earth. We started talking during hikes, sharing stories and laughter. There was a lightness to our interactions that I hadn't felt in a long time. One afternoon, after a particularly challenging hike, we sat on a rock overlooking a stunning vista. Emily turned to me, her eyes sparkling. "I'm glad you joined the group, Jake," she said. "You've brought a lot of positive energy to our hikes." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Thanks, Emily. I'm glad I joined too. It's been great getting to know everyone, especially you." We continued talking, our conversation flowing effortlessly. It was easy being with her, like a balm for my wounded heart. Over the next few weeks, our friendship deepened, and I found myself looking forward to our hikes, not just for the exercise, but for the companionship. One evening, Emily invited me over for dinner. It was a simple, home-cooked meal, but it felt special. As we sat on her porch, watching the sunset, she reached out and took my hand. "Jake, I know you've been through a lot," she said softly, "but I want you to know that I'm here for you, whatever you need." Her words touched me deeply. "Thank you, Emily. That means more to me than you know." As the months passed, Emily and I grew closer. Our friendship blossomed into something more, a relationship built on trust, mutual respect, and genuine affection. She became a source of strength and joy in my life, helping me heal from the scars of the past. Looking back, I realized that Linda's betrayal, as painful as it had been, had also been a turning point. It had forced me to confront the reality of my life and make the changes necessary for my own happiness. I had learned to value myself, to recognize my worth, and to seek out relationships that were healthy and fulfilling. Emily and I took things slow, allowing our relationship to develop naturally. We spent weekends hiking, exploring new trails, and discovering the beauty of the world around us. Our shared experiences brought us closer, and I found myself opening up to her in ways I hadn't with anyone else. One crisp autumn day, we hiked to a secluded spot overlooking a serene lake. The leaves were a riot of colors, and the air was cool and refreshing. As we sat on a blanket sharing a picnic, I turned to Emily, feeling a sense of contentment I hadn't known in years. "Emily, these past months with you have been amazing," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "I never thought I'd find happiness again, but you've shown me that it's possible." She smiled, her eyes warm and loving. "Jake, you've brought so much joy into my life too. I'm grateful for every moment we've shared." As we watched the sun dip below the horizon, I realized that this was what I had been searching for: a sense of peace, a feeling of belonging, and a love that was true and enduring. Emily and I had both been through our own trials, but together, we had found a way to heal and grow. Life wasn't perfect, and there were still challenges to face, but I knew that with Emily by my side, I could handle anything. The pain of the past had given way to the promise of a brighter future, and I was ready to embrace it fully. As we packed up our picnic and headed back down the trail, I felt a sense of gratitude for the journey I had been on. It had been a long and difficult road, but it had led me to a place of hope and possibility. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly happy. The future was wide open, and I was ready to face it with Emily, my friends, and the strength I had found within myself. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I had moved on, and I had found love again, and for that, I was deeply thankful. As we reached the bottom of the trail, Emily took my hand, and I squeezed it gently. "Here's to new beginnings," I said, smiling at her. "To new beginnings," she echoed, her eyes shining with happiness. Together we walked into the future, ready to face whatever came our way, knowing that we had each other and the strength to overcome any obstacle. And in that moment, I knew that everything was going to be all right.